thing you and I both know right now is that prospects are looking for ways that they can shave off whatever. People are scared. Maybe even if they have money in the bank, they still don't want to spend as much because of uncertainty. But how can you as a sales professional still negotiate, understanding what your buyers care for the most right now, and ensure that you still make a good deal for you and your organization? In today's episode, we're going to lay out what that episode or what that strategy should look like in this episode. I know you're going to love it. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, we have Mark Raffan on a podcast. Mark runs an organization known as the Negotiation Ninjas. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about the number one thing that's on your buyer's mind, whether that's somebody in procurement, somebody that's one of your the executive buyers. People are concerned about ways that they can shave off some of the expenses. Like, what else can I get rid of? What can I do to make sure that my organization is thriving, that we're succeeding? So we're going to break down what that is. And Mark gave some revolutionary ideas today. I mean, some of the things that probably sounds counterintuitive to you or to me, but he justifies it and he shares the principles, and you're going to love it. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, consider subscribing to the show, as well as take the link, share it with one of the team members, somebody else that can benefit from this episode, because I guarantee you it's going to be straight gold and you're going to feel that you need to pay for it. It's that good. Also, check out our sponsors, because they're giving you away amazing offers that can benefit you and your organization. Listen to the things that Mark shares as we dive in. He has a podcast as well, and he lays out this concept, the challenge that he's coming across, and how you and all of us are coming across this, and how we can handle it. He gave several principles, and he gives those reasons, again, behind each of them. See how this flows. Check it out. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Of course, man. I thank you for having me on your podcast as well, and want to give a little shout out to that too. We have a link down in the show notes. You guys go ahead and check out Mark's podcast. But Mark, why don't you take a second, tell us about the show, and tell us a little bit more about what you do, because I think all that lines up together so well.
Yeah, totally. So I am the founder and the head of training at a company called Negotiations Ninja, where we train people how to get better value out of their difficult conversations and out of their deals. And so that involves helping people on the procurement side, helping people on the sales side, helping people on the operations side have conversations that drive better value, reduce risk for the organization.
So you're like the UN, man. You're like friends with everybody, seems to be.
Yeah. I'm like Switzerland.
You're bringing everybody together to the table, like, salespeople, procurement, come together here, talk.
Yeah.
Ops.
Oh, well, I mean, and I think that's really important, because a lot of people on both sides of the table, whether you're in procurement or you're in sales, you think you're competitors, but fundamentally you have the same customer, right? Like, the business user to procurement is procurement's customer. They are a shared service. Mm-hmm. And much the same way that to a salesperson, that business user of the product or the service or the software they're selling is their customer as well. And so it is interesting that we, so far down the line between procurement and sales, we view each other as, competitive threats, but really we're trying to achieve the same goal, albeit different ways to be able to achieve that goal, but we're trying to achieve the same goal fundamentally.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, I think you're 100% on point with that. And I think that leads to this conversation today. One of the big things that sellers are getting, or they will get, is right now on top of all business mind, and I may be wrong on this, but a lot of the buyers on their mind is, we need to cut costs. We need to have a way to be able to come in with, renew that contract. We need to shave something off. You see job cuts all across. And I mean, I'm not saying doom and gloom. People are hiring in different industries and so forth. However, like, overall, there's a sense that people want to look for ways to be able to prepare for more unexpected turbulence that could come ahead. That's a difficult conversation to have as a salesperson. And I want to know from your side, being Switzerland, how do we do this? And what are they thinking? And how do I navigate this? I need your help. Come on, Mark.
Yeah. I mean, I think this further reinforces my point that it's a controversial thing to say, but there is no such thing as a win-win negotiation. I think it's a nice, we're going to make a lot of people really angry with that statement.
We need to make that for like the TikTok reel or something, guys. Say that again for the people in the back.
Yeah, I really don't believe that there is such a thing as a win-win negotiation. I think it's a really dangerous mindset to put yourself in.
Why?
Because especially when the market changes like this, right? So let's say, for example, the market changes, CFOs are knocking on the door of procurement, chief procurement officers are knocking on the door of their staff. They're saying, hey, you know those contracts you got going on? We need to reduce the cost of those
Mm.
contracts. And then the procurement people are like, look, we have great relationships with these people. Everything's fine and dandy. And the CFO says, yeah, listen, I don't give a fuck about your relationship. We need to cut costs. And so naturally, whenever that happens, and by the way, I've been on several conversations like that very recently where the CFO has said, this is just the way it's going to be. And so procurement is tasked with going out to the market and saying, hey, guess what? We're reducing your costs. And that doesn't really sound like a win win, does it? And so, in that kind of a situation, when we are going that direction, which we are going that direction, we need to find ways to be able to retain value whilst also maintain the relationship. And when you get yourself into that kind of a situation, whether you're on the procurement side or the sales side, because let's be real, sales get that same conversation. That's happening right now with a lot of software companies where you've
Yep.
got activist shareholders. I won't name the big, large CRM company that this is happening to right now, but you've got activist shareholders coming in and telling the CEO, look, you mean to maximize profit. Oh, and by the way, we're also seeing a decline in seats across the entire board. So, what does that mean for your customer? Your customer is going to get a price increase request. And so, procurement's going to face that from some salespeople. And so, that doesn't sound like a win win either. And so, when we're in that kind of a situation, how do we maintain value? How to retain value? And then, how do we maintain the relationship going forward? That's what you need to start thinking about.
Wow. And I think you're just the notion of that win-win, almost like redefining that, because in our way
Yeah,
of growing up, we've had this notion of like there's a black and white, but I think what you're getting at, there's some gray here, and the reality of the
there's definitely
situation.
gray.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think the
keep going deep on
danger
that.
of it is that people they believe in win-win has this Valhalla state of negotiation outcomes that we would all love for it to happen. But the
Mhm.
reality is that it very rarely happens, hardly ever happens, because it depends upon both parties being rational, reasonable, and quote unquote fair with each other. But what is rational and reasonable and what is fair? It's
Mhm.
based on the perception of the person who's doing the negotiating from either side of the conversation. And so you may say, look, it's fair for us to increase our prices. And I might say, I don't think that's fair at all. And now we're not we're not really in a situation that makes sense, right? And so we can still come to an outcome that we can both potentially agree on, where you get something that you want out of the deal and I get something that I want out of the deal. But you need to be very careful of thinking of that as quote unquote win-win, because win-win obligates me to get you a win.
Yeah.
In order for you to win, I have to get you a win, and
Wait,
I
what
don't
do you
want to
mean
be
by that? I
obligated to do that.
so and I think that's an interesting part. So it's not your job essentially to, because you're going to feel guilty in that sense, like I didn't come with your win and my win, I'm trying to survive here, I'm trying to keep my job, Donald, but you want me to
Sure.
go and actually come back and find something for you. It seems, again, it sounds harsh, for real, straight up, but it sounds kind of like selfish on that side. How do I do that then? Do I come back counter with my win, or my want, my ask?
Yeah, look, you've at the end of the day, you've got to know what it is that makes sense for you. And I think the dangerous situation that most salespeople get themselves into is they always think of the customer first, which is amazing. Like, good for you for
Hmm.
being so customer focused. But oftentimes they sacrifice their own interests to ensure the best interests of their customer. And then they end up conceding way too much in the conversation, don't retain value. And that's what happens when you You push to, I mean, I was in one of those conversations this morning where someone was trying to buy my services and they pushed
Mm-hmm.
way too far beyond the point where I was willing to say, this isn't worth it for me at this volume. I can't do that. And I ended up walking away from that deal because it wasn't worth it for me to be able to do that. Most people don't do that. Most
Mm.
people just keep sailing straight by the point where they should have walked away from that deal, and then you end up getting a deal that doesn't make sense for you, and that doesn't feel like a win at all. And now
Yeah.
you're in a situation where you're like, this isn't going to work for me. But everyone likes to say like, oh, I thought you believed in collaboration and win-win. Okay, but only it sounds like you only believe in win-win when it's right for you, not when it's right for like both of us, right? So it's a great tagline, but I don't think it's a great strategy.
Oh man. Oh, ruffle some feathers today. If you like
Yeah,
what's
it's
going on today, go ahead and drop Marks. What's your LinkedIn handle? Um,
Mark Raffan. Just search my name, Mark Raffan,
all right.
on
So send
LinkedIn.
Mark and I a message on LinkedIn right now. If this is resonating with you, just go ahead and hit us up. Donald C. Kelly. Send a group message. Say Mark and Donald, y'all spitting some stuff here, but it's hard for me to swallow it. So Mark will respond in that chat. This is gonna be good. Um, so let's continue though. So the I need to make sure I don't go to, and I go back to this whole idea of the concession. If I get to the
Yeah,
point where I'm taking on deals, because I know where salespeople come from too, where it's like I
yeah,
just need to build pipeline, I just need to build up this
yes.
deal, I need to hit quota, put whatever crap is in the on a deal on. The danger of that for the long run. Talk to me about that. If I just put on a really skinny, horrible deal just to have something on the pipe, what's the impact of that long term that you've seen in your
Yeah, I mean the
experiences?
impact is that you're not going to be able to maintain good profitability for a lot of those deals. I think
Mhm.
this really depends on a lot of this, depending on what sector you're operating it within,
Sure.
depending what industry you're operating within. This changes a lot because obviously in SaaS the margins are significantly higher than services, for example, right? So there
Yeah.
may be more room to move in a lot of those. So if you sacrifice margin and get a like a lower quality deal, here's especially if it's an enterprise deal where you've got a lot of people that are going to be looking at that deal 3 years from now when it comes up for renewal, especially procurement people, they're not going to want those costs to increase that much or at all. In fact, they most likely are going to be asking you to decrease costs because that's
Mm.
how they maintain their value within their organization. And I just think that there's very little room for you to move at that point. And so I think you need to learn how to manage those concessions when they come up and retain that value. There's a few things that we talk about in our training. We talk about the 3 layers of concession strategy. The
Yeah.
first is to make sure that you only give something if you get something in return for that thing. We call it conditional giving, right? So if I was a salesperson, Donald, and you were to ask me for a price decrease, I might say, hey, Donald, I might be able to do that. Keyword, I'm going to make it conditional, might be able to. I might be able to do that if you can. And then I would ask you for something in return. So if you can do X, if you can do Y, whatever it might be. The second layer is portional giving. Portional is not a word, we made that up, but it's
I
to
like
give
it.
a
Yeah.
portion of something. So if you were to ask me for a 15% decrease, I would only give you a portion of that 15% decrease. So I might say, Donald, I'm not able to do 15%, but I might be able to do 3% if you can. And you can see I'm tying it into the first one now. And then the third layer, of course, is to ramp up scarcity of that concession. I want to make you believe that the concessions are more scarce than they probably are. And what happens to the value of a good or a service or anything when we make it more scarce? Obviously, the perception of the value of that thing goes up. So if you were to ask me for something, the first response I'm actually going to give you is, that's going to be difficult, Donald. Now, you're gonna think to me, okay, well, in your head, there's less probability that I'm going to get the thing. I'm starting to condition you that there is less probability. And so when you eventually get that quote unquote concession, you feel so good about it that you walk away feeling great about the deal. Those are the 3 layers of concession strategy that
Come
we
on.
teach.
If you guys walk away right now with only hearing thus far, I think you would be way ahead of like 90% of the other sales professionals out there in situations like this. And I really like that those go back to the human psychology behind them, and your creative words that you had your literary license to utilize. I think that's awesome. I like it. We're gonna put that in the show notes. And then the conditional giving concept, it just makes total sense. Like if I
Yeah,
give you something, I should be getting in return. Um,
yeah.
and I think there's in every business we can't give any specific examples. I mean, I'm sure we can give some specific examples. Maybe I can ask you to give me one that you've had done. But I'm sure in each industry, as a seller, as you're thinking about this, you probably can think
Yeah.
about some that you can give. What's something you've done in the past where it was conditional?
Yeah, so for me, I sell training services, right? So I can
Mhm.
liken it to that, and then I'll give you another example as well that's maybe
Sure.
more mainstream. So for training services, what's most important to me are warm or hot introductions to other folks that could also take my training. So if someone asks me for a discount on my training and the volume is big enough, I might say, okay, I might be able to do that if you can give me 5 hot introductions to other VPs of sales in other businesses. We make it contractual. I have to be CC'd on that email to that person. Then you get your deal.
Yeah.
You may be in the SaaS space and someone asks you for a discount in the SaaS space. You may say, okay, I might be able to do that if you can sign by X date, or if you can give us these payment terms, or if you can put in whatever it is that's most valuable to you. If you're in the startup, payment terms are obviously really, really important to you, and deal closing speed is really important to you as well. So those are probably the two most common ones.
Love that. A lot of great ideas here, guys. So far we spoke about the fallacy of the win-win, then we talked about how to make sure how to do concession properly. One of the other things is the idea of managing expectation. You and I spoke about that.
Yeah.
Um, for round this out for me and put us all together. How what exactly do you mean by managing expectations, and how give me an example of how do I go about doing that effectively?
I think we don't do ourselves a good service. In fact, we do ourselves a disservice by not managing expectations correctly at the beginning of the negotiation about what could or could not be available. And so I go as far as for a lot of the sales folks that I train to come out and say what the levers of negotiation are for the counterparty so that they know what levers to pull in that conversation. So, for example, if you and I were just starting a conversation and I was in sales and you were in procurement, I would say to you, Donald, look, I know that you're going to try and get best value for your organization out of this, and rightfully so, you should. To be upfront about it, I want you to know that I have two levers of negotiation. One is volume, and the other one is introductions. So if you want to get a better deal on pricing, you have to give me more volume in order to be able to do that, or you have to give me introductions to other people who could also buy my services. If you want to get a deal, those are the ways that we go about getting that deal.
Love it. The I think there's I've gotten to the situation where I had the happy ears where like yes, go back to what we said in a previous one where it's the concession where one I hear they're gonna sign, so I jump and it's win in their favor, not win in mine. The win, it's a loss, but we get something. But then two, where I don't manage that expectation from the get
Yes.
go, and then afterwards I try to get something from them, and it's like, bro, you already gave me you already gave me the cake. Don't try to charge more for it at this point. You gave me free whipped cream. So, um, but I mean, how do you remember to do this? Though, how do you make sure
Yeah.
you can consistently do this?
I think the only way to do it is to know very, very clearly what it is you're trying to achieve out of the negotiation. I think most people start their negotiations wrong by not understanding what their aspirational goals are for that negotiation.
Mm,
It's probably easiest to think of a quote unquote aspirational goal. That's our word for it, as a desire. So, for example, if you were a salesperson, you have, let's maybe say you have 2 to 3 aspirational goals. One or two of those is to make more money or reduce risk. Let's say those are broad, large aspirational goals. Those are great high-level desires, but they don't really deliver the goods for you. So you've got to break those down into actionable, negotiable, what we call success drivers. What are the drivers that will drive the successful outcome of that aspirational goal? So, for example, if you said, I want to make more money, then I would say, okay, great. How are you going to negotiate making more money? Are you going to negotiate more product? Are you going to negotiate more seats? Are you going to cross sell additional items? Are you going to get more introductions? Are you going to increase your prices? It could be a number of different ways that you negotiate into the contract to make more money. And now that you know exactly what it is you want to do, you've got to determine at what point am I willing to walk away from this deal if I don't get those things that I want. So, for example, if you have an actionable step to increase your prices, what is the lowest price that you would be willing to accept at the current deal before you decide to walk away? And so we just walk it through strategically, step by step. What is it that you actually want to get? Now, the reason that we do that is because most salespeople, if you recall what I said at the beginning, they are so customer focused that they sacrifice their own value in order to get value for the customer. So we don't often think about ourselves that way. And so in order to do that, we have to focus on what is it that we want to get. Because if we don't, then we're just reacting to a request from the counterparty. We're not actually doing any strategy work. We're just reacting to the situation. And we know that statistically, based on anchor-based pricing methodology, if we just react to something, it's statistically more probable that the counterparty is going to get something closer to their number than our number. So it doesn't really make sense. So we have to have a plan in place.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to everything that you're saying, especially at this point here. If I go into this meeting knowing what I want, understanding like what true win-win, that it doesn't really exist, but understanding, and I think that's the third time you mentioned knowing what you want in this episode. Like if I go in with that as a sales professional from the very jump, there's a high probability that I have a that this deal could work out in my favor.
Yeah, and by the
And
way,
everybody,
I'm not negating that you shouldn't understand what the customer wants, right? I mean,
yeah,
obviously you should want
that's the
that.
given. Yeah,
And also, you should
yeah,
also know what you want.
yeah. Man, love this. There's so much that we can go deeper on with this, but I know you got so much more to do, and I want to make sure you, listener, listening to this, got a better understanding that can, at least help you once you're getting in this situation. Give you a good little 20 minutes here. Now I do know you have something else coming up. Reese, you have a book, right? Is the book launching
Yeah, I have a
soon?
book coming out in the fall. Yeah,
Okay.
not 100% certain on dates yet, but best way to keep an eye on that is to keep checking out our website at negotiations.ninja or follow me on LinkedIn.
Okay. So I'm here. I love what you shared today. You brought some good insights. I may be a director of sale, VP of sale. I want to get in touch with you, or an individual contributor. Love your stuff. And I want to get connected to you. Is LinkedIn the best place? Go back to the site. Where should I go?
Either place is fine. Like if you go to LinkedIn first, that's great. I'm going to engage with you on LinkedIn. Just make sure that you mention that you heard me on the TSE podcast because that's really important. Or go to our website, do the same thing. Make sure that you say you heard us on this podcast. That is really important because I'm going to tell Donald thanks and I'm going to send him a nice bottle of wine.
All right, man. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, man. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for helping us, laying out this framework for us and helping us to know what to say in these conversations when we get them from our customers, especially now, as they need to cut
Yeah,
costs.
thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Great pleasure.
Anytime. Hey, listen, that was Mark Raffan. If you haven't connected with Mark as of yet, please go ahead and do so. I hope this episode to you proved to you that he knows what he's talking about, can deliver value to you and your organization. I'm grateful that you listen. I'm grateful for Mark, and I want to thank him and for the efforts that he's doing to help us to be able to continue to grow and improve. Listen, again, if this is your first time listening to our podcast, please share it with somebody else. If you're listening to this and you found benefit from it, help your team members subscribe to the show again and leave us a rating and review. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And you can find Mark information in the show notes. We do this podcast for two things. One, to help you to build more pipeline, and two, to help you to be able to convert a high percentage of that pipeline. This episode today fell right in that gap of helping you to be able to convert more of that pipeline in today's climate. As always, I want you to succeed. I want you to thrive. Most importantly, I want you to go out, raise your level of thinking, and do big things. Thanks so much for watching.